those were two very difficult sessions to follow. They were very, very good. It's much better. It's like if you're a rock band, what you want is a slightly rubbish support act that you can then be impressive afterwards. But okay, I'm just giving people a second to get into the room. I was very disappointed with the show of hands at the end there. And I think it shows that actually more teaching and more education is needed. I thought, I mean, I'm not being, partisan here, but Joe absolutely nailed a few points there that I thought, actually, I almost wanted to put my hand up and say, hey, scrap my talk, just quickly rewind the footage and run the bit about Joe explaining the category error. Alistair used the wrong word at one point. He talked about the wrong kind of automation that's facilitated by AI, and he said logical. And there's a very big difference between logic and statistics. I'm from one side. I'm going to be talking about big data very briefly. Big data and what it is. Oh, it's a teaching opportunity. Okay, yeah, no, we're going to explain what big data is. I'm going to explain what I mean by deep data. I'm going to talk about secure data environments, which feeds in very nicely to the layer, the data layer that we need to build so you can actually have an ecosystem on top of it, so you can have the democratization, so that you can actually use AI sensibly. I'm not really going to talk about AI very much. Try not to. The challenges in building that data layer, I'm not sure about we might be too late in terms of talking about some aspects of software or AI as a medical device, but I don't think it's too late to build the right data layer. I can see how we might screw that up, but hopefully we won't. And I'm going to talk about progress, because another thing that was said in the first talk was the proof is in the pudding. And fortunately, we have dessert. I'm acutely aware that lunch is 15 minutes away. Big data, it's data of a very large size. Well, obviously, I mean, if you ignore the sort of the reports that used to come from McKinsey, no offense to McKinsey if you're here, about, oh, it's volume, it's veracity, no, forget about that. It's, data of a very large size, or if you go for Wikipedia, actually, which is, or if you ask ChatGPT, we'll just regurgitate the Wikipedia definition at you, that for which you need new tools. And one of those new tools, of course, will be the wonderful things that we've got from AI. But you don't, I mean, this whole point about deploying AI to make decisions for you on the fly, really, in many cases, I don't want to be too unfair, but, it's as if you're asking, you want a car, and somebody gives you a car factory. You don't want a car factory. You don't want to be deploying these models. What you want is somebody's used modern technology to build something that you can then rely upon. Anyway, we'll go into that. That for which you need new tools. Or, coming back to another point, really it's someone else's data. Now, what do I mean by that? I completely agree with the first session. If you're watching this on video, go and rewind it and watch that again instead of listening to me, because there were some lovely points made about when Nick was saying, actually, ownership is the wrong framing here. So what do I mean here if I'm saying it's someone else's? Someone else collected it. It wasn't collected by you, for you. You didn't control the context of collection for that data, which means you're not necessarily entirely on top of the meaning. Now, that is the difference between the kind of medical research we want to see in the future in 2026 going onwards and what was traditionally done with our manual data management. Now, when I first, does this go backwards as well? Oh, thank goodness. When we first snuck into this building at the back, just to try and work out where we could get the best desks or whatever, it was full of filing cabinets. And I think that's where a lot, and this comes back to the point made about what we're trying to regulate, we're still in a very manual world, in that the data may be in computers, but our use of those computers is very manual. And it's not sufficiently automated, it's not really reproducible, and it's not scalable. Scalability is a meta-level question. You don't, if you wanted to build a bigger, oh, I don't know, a salad industry for the UK, maybe you're worried about food security. You don't try and build a tomato the size of Greater London. What you want is, greenhouses, polytunnels, food distribution networks. There's infrastructure that needs to be built. Now, the someone else's data will come up again in a moment. Translational research, this is the Translational Research Summit. I don't need to explain what that is. I'm going to just give you these assertions. It requires deep data. What's deep data? Well, we'll find out. Actually, I'll just give you the example because you only got 10 minutes. Assurance regarding context and interpretation, particularly with AI. What AI does is encodes context. You need to know what the meaning of the data is. There's even a bit where, we've got to update all our ideas, not just the idea of data capture in paper forms, but also our ideas about FAIR, for example. It's a very nice idea, where there's a couple of people in the room might have been involved in findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable thinking about data, well-intentioned, but 10 years ago, and very much pre-AI and pre-automation. Again, about manual notions of data and its meaning. We actually need to think about how do we get this assurance regarding context. It's another minor category error. When people talk about the semantic web or the semantic layer, they're thinking about semantics in terms of pointing at a concept that we can all agree upon. No. Semantics is about context, structured descriptions of context at scale, and how you use that context, whether it's about ownership or governance or interpretation or provenance, to actually dictate how we manage the data. Right, with a high degree of automation. So we're in the AI age, we're in the big data age, and actually, of course, while protecting the interests of patients, professionals, and the healthcare system. Some people who are in this room were partly responsible for this. I think this is, I completely agree with what Nicola Burns said earlier. Privacy is not over. I'm not sure about the t-shirt, but privacy is not over. In fact, it's more important than ever. I think we're going to suddenly realize that we've been selling our property, our land, for strings of beads. And I think actually, I'm quite happy to talk about what we do in terms of, again, GDPR, almost right, but not quite. Actually, we've been given away. We've been consenting to stuff that actually we really shouldn't have even been asked to consent to. So, okay. Deep data, when I'm talking about deep data in a healthcare or translational research setting, I don't mean the administrative data at the top, the ICD-10 codes or the SNOMED codes or the even medicines prescribed in primary care. I don't mean the audit and registry data. I'm beginning to contemplate shared care records, depending on how you do it. I think the big problem that we have with FTP and the notion of a single patient record isn't that it's not badly needed, it's just that it'd be very easy to get that architecture wrong. The existing architecture of FTP is not quite right, it is wrong, and it creates tremendous dangers for us. What I mean by the deep data is the data that is in the actual electronic patient record systems, the data that is entered by healthcare professionals and used by healthcare professionals and generated by laboratory systems and generated for medical imaging and digital pathology genetics, the data in the specialist systems. We now have secure data environments. A better name than TRE, the teaching opportunity, secure data environment. Most of the work is here. And this is what a data layer looks like. You have the source representation. I didn't know there was a thing there. Good, that'll be entertaining. Edit that one out if you can. Data arrives in a raw identified form. It's onboarded, it's cleaned, not turned into some other language, de-identified, and then you persist it here. Of course, we have a national data opt-out that's applied along the way. And actually, but the data collection itself is not consented. A very wise person who happens to be sitting in this room once said to me, beware of consent being used as a substitute for good governance. We don't want that. What we want is actually take responsibility. I could talk all day about metadata. We don't have time for that. Capture all of this, capture context, make that context available to the researchers. And you can have as many of these research environments fed by the same data layer as you want. Another way of looking at it, give you a metaphor, is that's the kitchen. You could have a kitchen that is supplying multiple dining rooms, multiple restaurants. And even if you really trusted where they were going with the data, you could do takeout. Now, data models. One lesson. A data model is a language. And that metaphor, that analogy it's not simile, is it? It will carry you a long way. So when people are talking about the source data models, now those, it's fine to have those proprietary. If Cerner, Oracle, or Epic want to use a particular way of representing information so they can make that flashy screen work, that's fine. What you really care about is that that is relatable to a version of the data that you have access to, so you understand what that data means and you can rely upon it. Common data models, nice, be very aware of these because they're languages that are not spoken by anybody. They don't necessarily have a purpose of their own. Target data models, this is what you've got. Where we've been going wrong at the moment is that all we've had are target data models. People go on these expeditions, the wonderful medical researchers go out there and they collect data to exactly their specification. It's not terribly reusable. It's been cooked. And you don't necessarily want to eat somebody else's meal. You maybe, I know there's a lot of, we can hope for packaged meals, but that tends not to be something that happens at home. You don't go around collecting meals that have been part eaten. And anyway, let's not worry about that. Target data models, the language of the analysis. And as we get to manage this infrastructure, the really important advantage of having managed research is that you get a chance to help researchers to share insights, to avoid duplication of effort, because you have an environment in which you can allow that to happen semi-automatically without them having to do anything, without them necessarily having to help. Another very wise woman said to me, look, to the first approximation, right, no successful researcher wants to help any other researcher with access to data. So if you're going to try and build data sharing in research, given the incentives, you need to help them. You need to have a managed research environment where insights and indeed useful derivations, research results, status can be shared. That's the real power of SDEs as far as I'm concerned, apart from obviously the enhanced privacy, which is that responsibility. If you're not asking people for consent, you must not be presenting them with risk. The data layer is what we should build. Oh, by the way, these target data models aren't necessarily for research. Almost all, we talk about secondary use of data in healthcare. Actually, that's not just for R&D or planning. Actually, clinically, it's being used again outside the context of its collection. Do you have a data layer that provides you with the assurance that you need? 5 minutes, that's very generous of you. Challenges, what are the challenges? The NHS does not enjoy free access to its own data. What it has done repeatedly is procured solutions from suppliers that give it a very partial view of the data. It pays the salaries of healthcare professionals who type that data in, and of course you read it out afterwards, some of it. It pays for the laboratory equipment. It actually pays for the software. A trust might pay £5–10 million a year, actually, for an EPR system. But that data is not there close at hand. In fact, the trust may not be able to get to all of it in practical terms at all. And when you come back to ownership, possession is 9/10 of the law. If I'm not necessarily picking on Epic in particular, but you can see how easily bamboozled even the Office of the National Coordinator in the US have been when people talk about, we will provide complete access to the data. What do you mean by complete access? What do you mean by complete? Can I have it one transaction at a time, one patient at a time over a period of years, providing I don't put too much of a load on the system? That is a problem we face. We have not got the bottom of our data layer. This is where Joe is coming from. We don't have access to all the data that we need. As it happens, In some cases, we're able to get that. Simon over there can get access to 100% of the data that he needs. In Oxford, we've managed to do that with some minor exceptions. I'll talk about that in a second. The source systems are not actually, why would the suppliers have designed a system that you can easily take the data out of? What happened to MySpace when you could get all the data out of it and went to Facebook? Clearly, there are incentives there that we need to deal with. There is only superficial interoperability in healthcare. And worse than that, even if you can get the data, you can't always get the context. One particular EPR provider in the contracts that our trusts in the UK sign actually prohibits sharing of screenshots or documentation. So if you've given that data to another hospital, that and actually because of the degree of customization, any other hospital, even if they've got the same system, it's very hard to convey at scale what that data actually means, which means you can't use it reliably. Progress. What we've done, Thames Valley and Surrey, oh look, there's a little logo over there that can have this. So a big shout out to NHS England Data for R&D programme who made this possible. We've got deep data at the moment for a population of 4 million people, and that's everything. That's everything. I mean, we have governance, and we have the technology, and we have stuck what are called integration runtimes into the environments of the other hospitals in our region. Swindon, love it, Great Western, Milton Keynes, Reading, Ashford and St. Peter's, and actually we just take the raw data out of the systems. Clinic letters, genetic reports, everything. That's the way to do it. Because if you mess with the data, if you put anyone between you and the data, you're not going to be able to do it at scale. That's the current cache. We don't pull it all prospectively because actually there's a lot of data that actually, well, most data is not used. I know there are reasons for not wanting to use it. It's just not really, there isn't a use case for it. We're building a deep data service on top of that. This is a shout out for Melanie Iverson's talk, who will be talking about something very related in a moment. The last point is, and all of this has been done as co-production. We really have had everybody involved. The community of practice has been fantastic. We've had that, not just the patients, the public, healthcare professionals, but also, good and hot, people like me, computer scientists involved, and obviously, some healthcare informatics professionals as well. Industry have played an incredible part. Shout out to Arcturus, who actually kicked us off on this path. And I mean, I don't know, they knew where it was going to go, but it really helped. We had a 5-year head start thanks to them. And really about team science, actually. And this is, you've got to build something, coming back to those researchers. Why should a particular researcher focused on publications and maybe a patent or something, or heaven help us, if you think researchers don't want to share data, wait till you come to industry. You've actually got to build a proper foundation on which you can let these people, with their incentives, with the idea of, I remember somebody from pharma saying to me, Jim, there's no such thing as a pre-competitive space. You've got to build this platform, and then you can have everything that you wanted, even regulatable, trustworthy AI. Okay, cheers.